Today, we're talking about some of the biggest question marks going into preseason for the Chicago Bulls. And so, before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Mazelis slam dunks in games. And so, in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so, make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we're talking about some of the biggest question marks heading into preseason play for the Chicago Bulls. And so I wanted to go ahead and start with the very first question that I have going into preseason play is going to be, who is going to start at the small forward position? Because we know that Kevin Huerter came in and he finished out the season and did very well for the Chicago Bulls. In fact, I said it several times. I think that this is a player that looked a lot like he did with the Atlanta Hawks, and he was on that team and helped that team get down to the Eastern Conference Finals. And so I love the fact that he just really spaces the floor for the Chicago Bulls, and I think that he's a pretty solid defender. In fact, I think he's underrated there, but I think that Kevin Huerter has a real high basketball IQ, and so that's what I love about him being in the lineup. And I think that another added bonus with Kevin Huerter there is that he really actually opens it up as far as just off ball movement. I think that that is something that Kevin Huerter has really done well throughout his career. And I think that when he's out there, it just makes the Bulls go into more of that type of action. And so let's see, if this team is able to take that step forward, with this offense. I was hoping that we will see some more of that this season, hopefully starting in the preseason, more off ball movement. But I do think that that's what Kevin Huerter really provides to the starting lineup. And I think that it's going to be interesting here because we've been hearing about just the physicality. We've been hearing about defense. And I think when you go out and you trade for Isaac Okoro, you are looking for defense. And so I think that this is very much going to be open, for a guy like Dosunmu, who can go out there and you don't have to run a play for him. He can get into the passing lanes, create steals and things like that, and he can score the basketball. So he's really your two-way player. And then with Isaac Okoro, look, I just love what we're going to get from him defensively. And I have him penciled in as having a very good offensive year this year. I think that he's going to come in with a chip on his shoulder. I think he wants to show that he's not just a defender. And I think that, Billy Donovan and just really this team is going to give him chances because we know what he can do, in open space as an athlete, I think finishing on the break. But I think that really we're going to find out a little bit more about Isaac Okoro and what he can do on the offensive end when he does get out there and he's forced into the corner to be like a 3-and-D player. Will he make the defense pay there? And can he be a guy that maybe just puts it on the deck, gets to the mid-range and things like that? And so we'll find out a little bit more. But I definitely think that if you're talking about defense, you have to think about, Isaac Okoro, and you also have to think about Dosunmu. And so I can't wait to see what we're going to see as this team is getting ready to open up against the Cleveland Cavaliers tomorrow. And that's going to be the first of five preseason games that they have. And so, I wouldn't be surprised if we see just a lot of players maybe shuffled in and out of the lineup at that small forward position, but let's see what happens there. And so the next question that I have going into preseason play is just how legit is this defense? And so I know that it's preseason. I know that these games don't count, but this is live competition. This is not, a controlled scrimmage or anything like that. Like, this is where you get a chance to see, okay, what you've installed in the defense, is this stuff going to work? Because we want to see, just that type of fight, the energy, the physicality that we've been hearing about. And I think that when you get into preseason play, this is the time that you want to set the tone. And so I do want to see if this team is able to cause turnovers. Are they able to speed other teams up? Is the physicality there as far as just when teams do get to the paint? Is there more resistance? Because that is really where the Bulls struggled out there. And so I love what Billy Donovan's been talking about. I love what I've been hearing from the players. But this is where, look, the words are one thing, but we got to see some action. And so hopefully we see that in preseason play as they ramp up for the season. And then the next thing that I'm looking forward to seeing here in this preseason play is going to be the breakout player, Modest Bazelis, and I do think he's going to deliver, especially when he's talking about he wants to be the most improved player and that he thinks that, look, the bottom line for this team is they got to go out there and win championships. I love all that. And the fact that he is wanting to go out and just really play some great defense and wants to be held accountable. In fact, he said that, look, that is the one thing that you are going to remember out of this season is my defense. And so I cannot wait to see that. So I do believe he's going to break out. But I want to see a guy like Julian Phillips, right? Like he was one of the first ones off the bench ahead of Patrick Williams there last season. And Billy Donovan seemed to show some trust with him. And so let's see if he has developed a little bit more here over the summer through training camp, because I think that you were starting to see the flashes of a guy that could be 3-and-D. And we know what he can do as an athlete as far as just getting out there and finishing off the break and things like that. But I'd like to see him maybe show a little bit more on the offensive end. Can he be a little bit more of a shot creator? You know, is he a guy that maybe he can find some easy baskets with his off-ball movement? I think that was something that was mentioned in the broadcast last year. And so Julian Phillips, I want to see, do we see that type of hunger here coming into the preseason? And the same for Dalen Terry. Look, I love what Dalen Terry had to say on the CHGO podcast. We've talked about this before with him working out with DeMar DeRozan. Also, too, he just worked out with Steve Nash. He talked about how he changed his diet, you know, putting on muscle and everything else. And so Dalen Terry, he is completely locked in. And I just really hope that he's able to carve out a role for himself. And so I'm not saying that he necessarily turns into a starter, but I think that it would be a great situation that if somebody goes down, you know, via injury, and so hopefully that doesn't happen, but, you know, that happens throughout the course of the NBA season. Could Dalen Terry become a player that you feel confident in possibly giving you a spot start or something like that? Like, I think that would be a huge step forward for him. And if he can just play some consistent minutes throughout the season, I think that that's a huge step as well. And I point to those two players because, you know, AK always talks about the young core. These guys are very much your young core. So I want to see, do we see something different that we have not seen from these guys in the past? And so those are two players that I want to see if we see some breakouts there. And then next, you know, talking about the wrinkles in the rotation, like I had that down because, you know, we heard Billy Donovan talk about, okay, last season, we didn't necessarily practice with having, you know, 2 5s out on the floor, which is 2 centers. And so I'm excited to see that. Like, I really want to see, okay, can you create some matchup problems that way? And the only way that you can find that out is you need to throw Jalen Smith out there with Vooch. You need to throw Zach Collins out there with Vooch and so on. Like, you need to mix that combination up. And so I hope that we see some of those combinations and just really, will we see a little bit of the 2-3 stuff that we saw last year? Like, I wonder, do we see some of this stuff that they're looking to go ahead and just utilize throughout the season? And so I want to see if we'll see those wrinkles and those coaching adjustments here throughout preseason. And then, you know, lastly, you know, I want to see some of Noa Essengue. And so I think that you could probably throw him in there with breakouts and then also too right in the rotations, because I think it'll be huge if he can go out there and steal some minutes in year one. This is a guy that is very raw. And so that would tell me a lot about him, that if he's able to come in this young and he's able to play, you know, some pretty good minutes for this team early on, the Chicago Bulls really have something with Noa Essengue, and the future certainly is bright when you think about this with him and Modest Bazelis, and just really this team continuing to get younger with this system and really this new identity on the offense and the defensive side of the ball. So anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here, what are you looking forward to seeing as preseason play gets set tomorrow, as they are getting ready to play the Cleveland Cavaliers. And so we will be talking about that post game like we always do, talking about the key moments out of the game and everything else. But anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. What is your biggest takeaway going into preseason play? And look, as we always say, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.